Welcome to That Could Have Been an Email. I'm Leslie Bailey.
And I'm Ron Shaw.
And we started this podcast to discuss the good, bad, and ugly of project managing, bring humor to our everyday project management and client situations, and a place to commiserate on all those things that our partners, friends who aren't in the industry never understand. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of That Could Have Been an Email. I'm Leslie Bailey. Along with me always is Ron Shaw. Ron, it's Monday. How do you feel?
It's a Monday.
That's
it's one of those ones where the weekend hasn't worn off yet, and I've still got that I'm really tired feeling. It's a Monday.
Yeah, I was telling Ron it was flurrying here in, let's say, North Chicago in the burbs, and I'm not ready for that. Even though I said I was ready for fall, I'm going to contradict myself a lot where I say I'm ready for cold. I'm not ready for that kind of cold.
You're ready for the pretty leaf changing, not the snow. That's
All
called
the
there's
photo
no
ops
fall.
and
You
not
just
the kind where
you just went to winter. That's
yeah, which you think after being here for 13 years you would be used to, but no. It's I definitely am not ready for the having to warm up the car before we go to school. I'm not ready for that. So luckily Georgette's a really big trooper and it was really cold in our car, but we made it and the rest is history. Here we are. So today we are going to talk about being a yes person. And there's been a lot of conversations around this because I want to say it was a couple of years ago. And I'm going to reference Adam Grant a lot because he comes up a lot on my LinkedIn. But, he was one of the first people I saw that said, you can say no, allow yourself to say no. But then if you think about that, a few years before that, it was like, be a yes person, say yes to everything. And everybody will think you're positive and can do it all. Well, you can do it all. The question is, should you? So, in reference to projects and events, when we're talking about being a yes person today, we're talking about should you be that yes person for every single question or every single concern that comes up in a project. And we'll kind of talk about it from the contractor side if you're working through an agency and you have other agencies that are working with that client as well, and also being on a team. Because, Ron, I think you and I can both say, in the past, even up till probably last year, we have been yes people.
Oh yeah, I go through the yes period, and it's I think it comes and goes throughout your career, like through cycles of like sometimes you hit that and you catch it and you're like, oh no, we don't want to go back here. And I don't think anybody's ever completely good at not doing that yes portion.
Mm-hmm.
Like you kind of phase into it and catch yourself and then have to pull back from it again.
Yeah. And I think early on in your career, you have to be that yes person. You want to show that you can, and you do want to show that your expertise goes further than just maybe your siloed piece of work, which is great. We all want to show that we've got different places of knowledge, different places of expertise for a client. However, it can sometimes create a problem for you because let's look at this. It's a double-edged sword. It creates a problem because your client gets so much trust and responsibility vibes from you that they go to you for everything. You somehow become their second opinion person if somebody else says no, or if they say they're not going to do it that way, which I don't ever want to. I wouldn't berate a client for going to get a second opinion. I totally get it. I've done it before. It's just if you go to someone outside of that agency to another agency, it creates a little bit of a problem because now these two are kind of pinned against each other. And you want to create that kind of cohesive working environment if you are working with multiple agencies or contractors. So the last thing you want to do is say, well, Ron said he was going to do it this way, and I like that way better. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to be like, okay, great. Go with that guy. He's obviously the better fit for you. So what do you think about it in regards to how it looks if a client, or even let's say a higher manager, tells you that, well, I went and asked Leslie about your way and she said it was like this. How do you feel about that? Do you shut down, or does it make you kind of get defensive? How does that create that kind of feeling in that environment?
I would say I am more prone. I wouldn't necessarily shut down, but I think I would likely get defensive. I think that's
Yeah.
just the gut reaction that I have right away. I may not show it, but internally I'm going to have that conflict where I'm like, well, why are you asking someone else about something that is my responsibility? And I mean that I think
Mm-hmm.
that comes along
Mm-hmm.
with ego. I mean that's our ego that is very hard
Yeah.
to fight when it's like, well, you've got me here for this. Why are you going elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it also, I'm kind of a shutdowner. Sometimes I don't know. It depends on the day, but it also creates that. Are you now going to question everything you do? Are you going to be thinking that that client or that manager is now every time you set a strategy or you complete a task in a project, are they now going to question that? And nobody likes that. I don't like sending something off and knowing or thinking that I'm going to get a response in like an hour asking me all these questions about what
Mm,
my strategy is and why I did it that way. And I think it's perfectly okay for a client or a manager to have questions about the way you're doing something. But if you have that feeling in you that you're going to expect them every time, and it's not a great feeling, it's not that you welcome them in some
mm,
way, is that you're expecting them to want you to either do it over again or do it in a way that somebody else would. So I think it kind of sets a bad tone for
right.
that project. Because it's almost like anxiety. It's almost like you're going to get anxiety every time you complete a part of that project. So to me, it's complicated. And as an independent contractor, it's really hard to say, know when to say no, but you kind of have to because it's only you. You're protecting yourself in a way, but still putting your brand out there that you do have expertise in all these areas.
Yeah. And just it's kind of thinking how I would react in a situation like that, going a little bit another step in. So one of the things you can do is to have a conversation with them if they've gone to someone else. I'm a curious person, so what I would want to know is, well, what led you there? Why did you actually go to that person to
Mm-hmm.
find out? Because is there something as a professional that I didn't provide you, or you just didn't like my answer? So having that, I think that understanding in front of it, you just didn't like my answer, and you want somebody else to give you what you're looking for,
Yep.
or there was a concern that you may not have addressed, and you were looking to see alternatives. Those help. I mean, knowing
Mm-hmm.
if it's just because they're not getting what they want, then it's probably not a relationship worth continuing
Yeah.
after what you're working on with them. If it's there's a concern because maybe you didn't explain something correctly, or they had some questions or concerns about the way you were approaching something, then that's okay. That kind of
Mm-hmm.
it helps provide feedback, and they may not always be comfortable enough having that conversation with you. So their default is, well, I'm going to go to somebody that I can have a conversation with about it. So I think understanding, that's where we don't
Yeah.
want to get into just doing the yes stuff, but getting an understanding of why they've initially gone somewhere else, and it can help at least help you get a better understanding of what's going on.
Well, and it's like, what's that? The line in Mean Girls where it's like, raise your hand if you've been personally victimized by Regina George. Raise your hand if you've personally been victimized by the client or team member not liking your answer,
Yeah.
and then they go to somebody else. So, and like you're saying, it's okay to not like the answer, but it's kind of the order you go in. So if you come back to me and tell me you don't really like that response, or you've heard in the past that it can be done this way, okay, let me tell you why it can't.
Mhm.
Don't automatically go to somebody else and then come back and tell me that you went to them, because it's the doing things without including the original person that I think hurts that relationship.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying there, and it can ruin that when you don't take the time to be like, hey, even to just say, I'm going to go ask someone else before you do it. It at least will open that area for conversation to happen. Because if you tell the person, well, I want to go talk to a couple other people, you can ask them why then, versus feeling, well, you just went and did it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
It can help.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, and I think we said it last time, just always including that original person, because, we go ask other contractors and team members all the time about how they would do something. Do you
Right.
think this is the best way to do this? Are we always right? No. There's been plenty of times I've gone to you where you're like, you can literally do this in 5 minutes. Your version takes an hour. And of course, we're open to doing that. So I think it's just kind of creating that open environment, especially if you've got a project that includes multiple different agencies that are somehow working together, just keeping kind of that open conversation going because agencies can always learn from each other,
Mhm.
contractors can always learn from each other. But it's the willingness to do that. It's not having to
Right.
because you went and asked them how they would do something. So it's all about really keeping that relationship intact. And I'm not saying that everybody has to work in silos. We've had that conversation a lot with a lot of organizations I've worked in. And we talk about it sometimes when we talk about digital and physical events, how those teams tend to work in silos and then they don't actually know what's going on with the other one.
Right.
So it's just kind of time and place for an open work environment or a kind of stay in your lane project. So that leads me into the next question or the next, let's say, conversation starter. What does saying yes all the time do for a project? It does great things. It gets things done. It makes that client feel like they do have the right people on that project to get it done and run smoothly. So, all things positive, let's say, for a project, it moves it along. Let's look at, though, how we kind of talked about what does it do from a negative side of project? Well, it can create some arguments or circular conversations
Mhm.
because you are questioning one person's strategy and going to another when they weren't necessarily hired for that
Mhm.
specific task or strategy. So, I'd be interested to see what different points you have on this too that we haven't already talked about. Because if I think about this, if I'm hired to do, let's say, the copywriting or the marketing, and you're hired to do the graphic design, and the client comes to you and is like, I don't know about this copy. What do you think? In my brain, I'm going to think, why are they asking a graphic designer when this is my expertise? I was hired for this. So, do you have different points on that? Like, how would you view, them going to somebody that wasn't exactly hired for that? I mean, how do you get around that? And you can't control a client. You can't make them not
Yeah,
ask
no,
questions like
you
that.
can't. You really can't. They're gonna do what they want to do in the end. If you're the one that they're coming to, it's something that's not related to what your job is or what you contracted to do with them. I it's okay to still have a conversation with them. You don't. I don't think you want to get into
Mm-hmm.
doing the work because that someone else is already getting paid to do that. Do not take extra on unless you are getting money
Yeah.
and you have the time and space to do that. But it's okay to act as an advisor because that's part of what relationships are being a trusted advisor, especially
Mm-hmm.
in the business sense. Uh, but when you have that conversation, I would always say, here's my level of expertise. Like tell them where you stand with the knowledge that you have about it and say, here's what I think about it based on what I know. I would go back and check with XY person because they're your expert on this and they may have some insights
Yeah.
that I don't. But again, it's okay to share your thoughts with them. Just make sure you level set and say, this is where I'm at with my own knowledge of this. You have someone there, go, but don't take the work on unless there's some contract work that's redone there. Uh,
Oh yeah. Yeah, because we do that a lot.
so one of the other
You may
things,
not notice that you do it.
one of the other things you were saying though, like as we're talking about, yes
Mm-hmm.
is a yes, it can be good. Yes can also be very, very, very dangerous if you get too much into the yes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you want to have boundaries, and yes does not permit you to always have boundaries. If you're saying yes to everything, you start to potentially pull away your time to do things because
Mm-hmm.
are you actually able to do it before you say yes? I think, and that'll probably be something we'll talk about here in a minute, but you've got to really have a
Yeah.
good understanding of your own personal time and availability before you say yes to everything.
Yeah, because if you think about time and availability, let's say you've become their point person. They respect your opinion, they value it, they really think that you are the number one person on this. And now they're sending you emails all the time, asking all these questions, which, you know, for a while probably makes you feel good that somebody really wants you to give your opinion on everything. But like you're saying, the time and availability, then you're going back to what we talked about, I think, in the very first episode of setting that precedent that I'm going to be around to answer your email at 8 p.m. Or I'm going to answer your question at 7:30 in the morning because if you're like me, I just want to answer it and get it out of my inbox. So if I have 2 seconds in between something, I'm going to do it.
Right.
So you're kind of establishing that you have opened the door to be the question master and answer all of those. And if you're like me, and I'm sure some people are, sometimes I read things and just fire off a response. I don't actually look into, was that my task or my responsibility? And now I just answered
Yeah.
it. Or I just did it, which has happened a lot. Um, and then, it's happened to me where I will reach out to somebody and be like, why did you do that? It was on, my to-do list, or I was going to do it today. And that creates kind of that awkward moment,
Right.
because then there's no prior conversation to that. So I think the time and the boundaries is a big one. And especially like you're saying, if you're an independent contractor, don't take on that work. I mean, like you're saying, somebody else is getting paid to do that. So you just did it for them. And, when you're working for yourself, you are more cognizant of those hours. And if they were built into your SOW, or if you didn't put them in there and you literally just did this project, and now how are you going to go back and ask for more? You can't really do that after you did it yourself.
Yeah. The other thing with yes is when you get into that habit of saying yes, it almost becomes auto fire. And there's sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when you shouldn't say yes. They may ask you to do something a certain way or tasks that really shouldn't be done. And I find this more with people that tend to have a people pleaser type of personality where they just want to make everyone happy, where
Mm-hmm.
they default to yes, and no is a very hard thing for them to say. Um, so that puts people in positions where you're not equipped necessarily to do what you've said yes to, or it may not just be possible to do what you've agreed and said
Yeah.
yes to. So that's where yes gets even more so dangerous. I mean, yes, your time, availability, knowledge, but
Mm-hmm.
if you get in that constant habit of saying yes, it just becomes reflex, and you
Yeah.
back yourself
Oh,
into a
yeah.
corner because you just automatic, yeah, yes, 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 thank you. And then all of a sudden you have to dial back because you come one day, you will
Mm-hmm.
find this, and I know this because I played yes for a very long time. You're going to find a point where you've said yes to something that it was a no, it was always a no, but just
Mm-hmm.
out of
Mm-hmm.
reaction you went to yes. So it's
Yeah.
really understanding that balance. It's not bad to say yes when it's appropriate, but it's really
Mm-hmm.
drawing that line of, is it the right time or the right reason to say yes to?
Well, yeah, because we talked about nobody wants to dial back. I mean, how do you dial back now after you said yes to everything? And that's always tricky. And maybe for some people it's super easy. If anybody's listening that has had to really rewind or dial back on something, let me know how easily you did it, because that's what gives me stress, is when I have to go back and be like, actually, I can't actually do that. Which I will tell you, over the last 13 years, I've done multiple times. Early on, when I didn't actually know how to do a lot of things strategically. But you never want to dial back. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to do that in any facet of life,
Mhm.
especially work. So, you know, I I don't necessarily know if I have any advice for dialing back after you said yes to everything. I think it just goes kind of back to transparency and just being honest about, hey, I looked into this for you. There's no other way to do it. I can't do this. You know, you should probably stick with that strategy. I don't know what has your experience been with kind of going in there and being like, actually, I said yes, but now, I can't, or it can't be done this way.
I I will go to them when I have to eat mud. When I do that, I will go back and present every other option that is actually available and possible. Because normally when they've asked for
Mm-hmm.
something, it's because they don't like a certain way something was set up, configured, whatever.
Right.
So when I know I'm going to go back and have that conversation, I'm looking for, we can't do what I said yes to, but here are the alternatives, and I will always go in with an
Mm-hmm.
apology.
Mm-hmm.
And to the
Mm-hmm.
other point that you were making about the dialing back on a single project, little bit easier. But if you've done this like multiple projects with the person or task, it's when you realize you've gone too far with the yes, you have to have an honest conversation with them. It's sitting down and
Yeah.
saying, look, Bob, I got into this habit of saying yes all of the time, and it wasn't always doing the best for our projects. Coming on this
Hmm.
project, I'm going to be saying no a little bit more as we go into things, but being realistic. I'm not going to say yes to say yes, I'm not going to say no just to say no. I'm going to tell you what makes sense based on what the goals and objectives are. So it's just, again,
Yeah.
that's everything we always cover is about communication and coming back and having an honest conversation. Some people may like that, some people aren't going to like it, but in the
Hmm.
end, it's always you have to keep, are you doing what's in the best interest of the client or the project when you're thinking about that? Saying yes all the time isn't, saying
Yeah.
no all the time isn't. It's what makes sense to actually get your project, your task, whatever done.
Yeah. And you don't want to, I mean, this is going back to talking about those relationships too. You don't want to get the reputation as a contractor of a contractor no one wants to work with. And I realize there's probably some out there. I don't know. I could be one of them. But you don't want to constantly say yes and override what somebody said and then get on another project and there's that same agency and they see your name and they are not happy at all because they tell everybody you're a know-it-all or that you kind of tend to kind of try to take over their work as well. So that's something to watch out for. But I do like your idea and your advice about having that conversation about what the next project looks like and how much you're going to offer outside of what you're hired for, outside of that scope. Um, because I think this happens a lot, and it's to no one's fault at all that you start to get to know a contractor or a client, and they say they have this other issue, and you say, "I have 4 years experience with that," but they've already hired somebody else to do it. So it's it's tricky, I think, in the first one you do if it's a first time client because they're getting to know you. They now see that you have copyright expertise, that you have virtual platform expertise, and they need that, but they've hired this other person who might be a little bit newer in that space. So they ask your advice. So I think it's kind of it's a tricky situation because if you have that knowledge, you never want to tell them, no, I can't answer that question just because you're saying no, because you weren't hired to do that. So I think, and I should actually say this to myself. I think it should be more of a process when hiring a contractor or getting, into a client kickoff that your expertise is kind of out there that
Mhm.
you can pretty much, yes, we have it on our resumes, we have it on our LinkedIn, but kind of look at their project, look who they've hired for, and you can put it out there. But like you're saying, clearly state what it is that your responsibility is for this project.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep the boundaries clear. And again, it's okay. At least I feel it's okay to offer if you have expertise and maybe it's a section you weren't hired for, it's okay to offer that. What you don't want to do is get sucked into actually doing that work if it's not something you were paid to
Mm-hmm.
do, if someone else was paid to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing you have to remember when you do give that type of advice or feedback to them, you don't necessarily have all of the pieces of the puzzle. And you need to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
that's always kind of stated because I've been in a situation before where I did give advice and I didn't have those pieces and there was something critical.
Yeah.
The client tried to move ahead doing with what I suggested, and then it had a fallback because there was
Mm-hmm.
a critical piece that was left out and that failed to come into my consideration. So it's very important to always, if you're going to give advice, make sure you state based on the knowledge and information I have, there may be other things, which is why you've hired this other person. And hopefully they have enough
Yeah.
knowledge to know what's going on. Copywriting, maybe that's not the case in a case like that. But if you get into more technical pieces or building out like timelines and flows, there's potential
Mm-hmm.
for more things, especially as you have more teams or more people that get involved into the whole process. You don't know all of the
Yeah.
pieces. So you can only offer what you know based on your experience and what you currently have available for information of that particular project, task, whatever.
Yeah. And in my experience, if they come to you the question and it's super simple in your brain, you're missing part of the puzzle. Like you're saying, there's no way that you have this ultra simple solution that nobody thought about. It's to me, it's happened before where, like you're saying, where I get a question and I'm like, well, just build it this way. And then it comes back with many details that were not included in the
Right.
first kind of explanation of why they're seeking out other advice. So if it seems super simple, it's probably not. Let's all just be honest about that. There's always caveats to things in our industry. There's never one simple path to it. It's just in my experience anyway, I'll speak for myself. It's never happened. So it's always, I mean, I like your idea of also if you're on the receiving end of getting those questions or second opinions, kind of ask why. Why are you asking me? Which may seem a little bit insulting, but to me, it's all in the language that you use. Just complimentary and just wanting to have all the details before you actually give a suggestion or recommendation. So it's like I said, we're in a tricky industry. It's definitely a lot of relationship based and everybody it's interesting and I can say this because I come from a copywriting background and then when I got into this events industry, everybody to me kind of bases their experience and their knowledge off of all the experiences they had because nothing ever goes 100% right. Everybody learns from it. And that's where the strategies come from, in my opinion. So it's, I look at a lot of the people we see. Just an example, everybody has taught IMAX on LinkedIn, just all these different things they were doing. They're going to learn from those experiences and take
Mhm.
those with them into the next project. So I never think there's a super simple solution for something. If I think it's simple, I know I'm missing something.
Yeah, and I think one of the best ways to learn is to fail and make mistakes. That those have been
Mm-hmm.
my best learning moments are mistakes that I've made. They stick because you don't want to make them again.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but to your point that you're making, yeah, it's there shouldn't be a problem. And if someone's asking you for advice and then they don't want to respond to questions that you have, I
Mm-hmm.
would be concerned with any advice that I'm giving because it just sounds like at that point they're just trying to get a second opinion and it may not be for the right reasons. If they're not willing to help you get to the right place, because in the end you're helping them. So it's when people become resistant to questions, I
Mm-hmm.
tend to stray back a bit on giving advice because that tells me that they're probably not really open to any advice that I might have to offer. Um,
Yeah.
because you want people to be asking as many questions as possible to get to a correct solution.
Yeah. And I think we see it happen a lot with virtual platforms where, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you're going to be in the same boat as me, where somebody has purchased a virtual platform and in the demo sales call, whatever it is, they've been told that it can't do a certain thing or it's limited to this or that. And they're like, okay, we'll make it work. We'll have a workaround. Then you get to your kickoff call, you get all your sessions in, you realize there's something you can't do in the platform. And everybody is just beyond annoyed and asking opinions of everyone of how we can make this work, how we can do this. That's the number one place I've seen this happen, where they forgot or they weren't on that initial sales or demo call and now it's a problem and we're going to go ask everybody how this can actually be done because we were told that there would be a workaround for it. That's the number one place I've seen that happen. I'm sure it has happened in physical events, whether it be sponsor booths, um, different activations, but I think for me the number one place I've seen it is platforms.
Yeah, I've had those experiences.
Yeah.
It's that's a breakdown of for me a breakdown of internal communication because
Mm-hmm.
that's something that starts earlier in the cycle with making sure that if you promise something in the sales cycle, it goes
Mm-hmm.
down. Like I think companies are doing better now about incorporating sales engineers into conversation to
Yeah, definitely.
from those they start looking at the solutions and digging in with developers if it's software or something like that as to what the possibilities are before fully
Mm-hmm.
agreeing saying well we can't do it but let's look in and see what the options are those sales engineers, that has become a very critical piece. I know I've seen that role grow over the time that I've been
Hmm.
in the SaaS industry. Is having that sales engineer becomes a really critical piece. But
Yeah.
again, it's got to continue down. You can't just stop there, because what happens is, great, you come up with a solution, but if you don't convey that to the
Hmm.
person that has to execute a project, then when they get on to start or kick off a project, and if they don't mention that, that sets an alarm off for the client now of like, why didn't you already know this? We talked about this.
Right.
That makes it harder for this person now to manage, because the client now going to view them as like, oh, this person's an idiot. They don't know that we did all of this.
Hmm.
But it becomes,
Hmm.
so it's keeping that internal communication going through proper channels of like, hey, we said this. This is what the process is. This is who I've already spoken to. Making sure all of the pertinent information flows through the channel with the client. So it's like the client and have their little backpack that goes with them, moving
Hmm.
them along.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the one place where you don't want to be the no person, is because you're going to have a target on your back for the rest of the project if you are the no person. It's not a great place to be in. Unfortunately, I've been in that place, and it's not fun. So it's saying yes comes along with the communication, especially like you're saying in the beginning,
Mhm.
where I've become super upfront about when I'm online and when I'm doing things, because we all have different, home work life situations. So, I mean, I'm never going to hide the fact that, yeah, I'm a yes person on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday, Thursday, tentative. But I think it does come in that early communication
Yeah.
of when you're saying yes. And it's, as we've all seen, there's changes in scope, there's changes in events. We know that's going to happen.
Mhm.
So being open to that, but on the client side, also realizing that if you come in with this big change or this different session order, there may be times where we have to say, no, that's not possible, or this isn't possible. So it's kind of being open minded on each side, knowing that more than likely, is it going to be yes? Probably, because everybody wants to make it work. That's everybody's number one goal, is for this to be a success. So I think, again, it just comes from being open on each side about the possibility of a no, but a most likely yes. It's just that communication has to be there, and that understanding
Yeah.
has to be there.
Yeah. Yes, you can do when yes is right. Whenever you're going to go with a no, no has to always come with reasons. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like, yes is much easier because you don't have to explain it. You just, yes, sure, and go do it. No, you've got to come back and you've got to outline why, and you've got to give more than likely alternatives to whatever they've asked to
Right.
try and keep that relationship going in the right direction. So
Yeah.
no is harder on many levels of communicating that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why we do like to default to yes. It is just the easy way to go. It's yes, yes, yes. Although it can create headaches for us by doing that.
Yeah. And I mean, that leads me to a good question is, and maybe a client out there can answer this. Do you, and I have no idea if this is a legal issue, so somebody can correct me if it is. If you're hiring multiple agencies, do you take the path of telling each contractor or each agency what they're hired for or what the other one was hired for? I mean, do you think that's overkill on the communication, or is that, I don't know, some kind of conflict? I feel like that might be, I feel like it could be both. I feel like it could be positive because everybody knows what everyone's doing. I feel like it could be a conflict because if they hire you for copywriting, and let's say I know I have more experience than you, next project, I'm going to go after that bid. So what do you think about that?
There's a fine line. It depends on their contracts more than us. You
Mm-hmm.
always, unless you have like it's something where it's like a partner company or agency, then you might have a no compete. If that's not the case, you can go after whatever business you want. If you
Mm-hmm.
can do it better than they're existing,
Yeah.
just don't burn the bridge with with doing that. Make sure that conversation is had correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a problem with it. If you see somewhere that's weak and you think you're able to deliver that service better, we live in a capitalist world. go
Yeah.
for it. Make
Yeah.
that cash.
Yeah. And I think you can do it in a positive way. I think you can look at the project as a whole, whether it was a website or event or
Mhm.
something like that, and present it in a positive way of how you could improve it. Or you could even go a step further if you wanted to and say how you could work with that other contractor and split the work.
Right.
So I think that open communication of saying, well, Ron was hired for this aspect of the project, this is yours. Okay, great. Then I know what he's working on. And if you come to me with a question of that project, is it open to go to him? Is it open to go talk to that other contractor and, maybe say, I've worked with this platform before and this is how I did it. So like I said, it could be a legal thing. I have no
It's
idea.
yeah. I mean, it comes into having conversations and asking questions. So, like with the client
Mhm.
saying, number one, I noticed we had this issue with this portion of the project. Would you be open to me having a conversation with this vendor and
Mhm.
finding out a little bit more? Then, when you talk to the vendor, one, are they open to feedback? Because
Yeah.
if they're not open to feedback, it doesn't matter what you say. But at least
Mhm.
it gives you a sense. And, at that point, you could go back and talk to the client, but maybe it's just you talk to the other vendor and say, hey, notice this happened. Some of my, stuff I've learned from the past or whatever. Would you consider working with me? Would you want help on this on the next one? And then
Right.
from there, you can kind of get a feel for where they're at. Then you can go back and talk to the main client and be like, maybe they said they could use help here. Great, I offer these services. Then you can kind of repitch in that
Mhm.
direction. But again, for me, it's always about having conversations and asking questions to really find out where versus just going into the I know it, because
Yeah.
that can bite you.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I wasn't telling any contractor to go out there and steal other work or look for something that wasn't as great as what you would produce. But just having the idea that, that could also open up the conversation to, different partnerships with the different contractors for bigger projects in the future. So it's just something to think about when you're put in the position of getting these questions or second opinions. It's kind of a different avenue that you could go
Mhm.
down.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have hit our time limit for this episode. I want to remind everyone that we are doing our charity at the end of December. So every listen that we get between now and then, I will be donating $1 to a select charity. I will announce that in a few more weeks once we get that fully flushed out. So make sure you're downloading, listening. We are all over social media. You know where to find us. And the more we get, the more I'll be able to donate. So, Leslie, thank you. This has been a great conversation and looking
Yeah.
forward to the next one.